Let's go to the transition provisions, and we have quite a few provisions dealing with transition. At the same time, I would believe that many aspects have not been actually handled in the transition way. So let's look at the transition. I think the key 5 or 6 areas to look at would be registrations. How are we going to transition our existing registrations? What would happen to output taxes in transition case? Let's say service happened earlier, money coming later, money received earlier, service happening afterwards, things like that. What happens to my accumulated credits or credits which are still to be claimed at the transition stage? Are there any other obligations on me cast at the transition stage? What happens to my pending refund claims, litigations and things like that? And of course, this is just a small subsegment of transition vis-a-vis the law. When you look at transition, it's a big game. This is just the legal aspect of transition. There are many process changes which will be required. There will be many business decision changes which will be required. Your contract itself might need to undergo a change. So all that we are just not talking about. Here we are just talking about the legal aspect of the transition. And we'll go through them one by one. The first one is of course registration. We've already talked about the 6-month criteria. So there are a couple of issues which we need to ensure, which also we talked about. Because it's a common GST portal, there will be only one login ID and a password, and therefore there might be a need for alignment of branch compliance teams if there are multiple branches in the company. Vendor compliance is ensuring vendors also register and transition. That is also going to be an important aspect. If some vendors don't transition, their credits moving forward will not be available to you, and you need to upgrade your information systems to capture all this information. That is going to be the biggest challenge. Yes.
What if somebody doesn't want the GST registration to come from?
No, so if he is above 10 lakhs, he is obliged to register.
I'm saying it's like you talk about a dormant company.
Yes.
Okay, now the company is dormant, but this number has not been cancelled. Say the service tax number has not been cancelled.
Yes. So you don't do anything for 6 months, or you surrender the number.
So suppose he doesn't want to surrender also.
Then you will be given a number provisionally for 6 months, and after 6 months it will be
For
cancelled.
those 6 months, if he doesn't do any return filing and
All the compliances will be there, and if he does not do that, there are penalties for each of them.
so you can't approach the GST authority and say that I don't want provisional registration.
No, they'll automatically give you provisional registration. You can surrender it. On the 1st of April itself, you have to apply for self-surrender.
Okay, so that possibility is there.
That possibility. But ab initio, they will give you a registration. Because otherwise it becomes complicated for the entire country to handle it. If they ask you a window before registration, it becomes complicated for that person. Yeah, because you are already on their payroll. If you have an existing number, either VAT or excise or service tax, they will transition. If you don't have that, no problem. Yeah. So either you cancel right now. That is also one option. So that is registration. Now we go to the output tax area. I'll ask Ritika to just quickly take us through this table.
Section 153, issue of supplementary invoices, debit or credit notes where price is revised in pursuance of a contract. The impact would be if there is an increase in value, GST law would apply. If there is a decrease in value, there will be a claim reduction in GST subject to the vendor agreeing to reduce input tax credit.
Very interesting type of a transition provision which they are saying. What they are saying is if you did an original supply in the old law, so let's say you raise an invoice of 1 lakh rupees in the old law, you pay the service tax which was applicable on that, that's a fact. Now later on you realize that this was not 1 lakh, this is 1 lakh 50,000. And when you realize this, you already have GST in place. So you have to raise a debit note of 50,000 supplementary invoice. So they are saying how will you address this supplementary invoice? They are saying if the supplementary invoice results in an increase in the value, so 1 lakh becomes 150, then on the 50,000 charge GST. Don't worry about the fact that this was a service rendered under the service tax law. Don't go into all of that. Pay GST, let the other person get the credit and move life ahead. It's not so easy to say, but that's what they are saying. Are you clear with this? They are saying if 1 lakh becomes 80,000, then you have to give a 20,000 credit note. There they say, if you give a credit note of 20,000 and you credit service tax, the other person will not be able to adjust the service tax. So they are saying you can adjust it against the current GST payment so long as the other person is okay reducing his input GST of the current year. Understand this well. You have initially raised an invoice of 1 lakh, you have paid service tax of 15,000 on it. Now you have a 20,000 ka credit note. Okay, ideally you should have adjusted the service tax and you will have reduced the service tax if GST wouldn't have been there. Now if they allow you to reduce the service tax, there is no output service tax in future. So it becomes that your education says people kept on increasing their balances for some time. It becomes something like that. So that is not workable. So they say, okay, you can reduce your current GST because of this old transaction, but I will allow you to do that only if the other party correspondingly agrees to reduce his GST input rate. Now this is something which is very open-ended. Who is going to monitor this? That's going to be a problem with this section. But yes, they have thought about a few things, not thought about all. This is the provision which is there. Let's go to the next one.
Section 59 gives the treatment of long-term construction of works contracts. The basis would be the date of invoice.
Again, good point, but only thing is this is still not visualized. Situations where there would be work in progress, there will be advances, all those situations they are not taken care of unless the point of taxation rules were not triggered, it's fine, you go on invoice basis. But because point of taxation rules itself has completion, you have milestones, you have advances, this might not be the sufficient provision to deal with it totally. Yeah, next one.
Section 160 is for progressive or periodic supply of goods or services. According to this section, advances will be taxed under the old law.
Moving forward, we talked about continuous services. We said advances is no longer taxable. But if you have already received a mobilization advance in the past and you paid service tax in the past, and again if you are expected to pay the tax on invoicing basis, it becomes double tax. So to the extent of advances under the old law, you have paid tax under the old law, no GST in the new law. So that is one thought which they have tried to bring. Next one.
Section 161 is for treatment of retention payments, which will be taxed under the old law.
Which is fine. Right? Next one.
Section 148, exempted goods returned to the place of business on or after the appointed day. It is not an independent supply if returned within 6 months.
Next one also we can read together and we can analyze it.
Section 149 is for duty paid goods returned to the place of business on or after the appointed day. Same way, not independent supply if returned within 6 months.
So here we have a situation that there was a supply which happened in the old law and there is a rejection in the new law. So they are saying this rejection will not be treated as an independent supply if this rejection happens within a 6 months, and it will be treated as a cancellation of an old supply made under the old law. So the existing provision of 6 months, to that extent, that continues only for the transition, not on an ongoing on a regular basis. So that is as far as the output tax is. Some transition which they have thought about. We now go to the second area, the credits and the transition related. Yeah. Yes. 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 No, so what will happen, let's say in March, there is a service tax. So when you receive advance, you are required to discharge service tax. So you would have, when you receive an advance, discharge service tax of 15% on that day. Now, let's say you raised an invoice, you received advance of 1 lakh. You paid 15,000 service tax. Later on, you raise an invoice of 1 lakh only. At that time, you are not required to again pay GST because you already paid the service tax. If invoice is full up, the differential 1 lakh will be a fresh supply on which you will pay GST. Yeah, so ideally in this type of a transition scenario, the advice would be to have two invoices, one for the advance component and balance for the extra component. So this is again going to be an implementation issue which will come.
So what will happen for the purchase order which have been raised before the appointed date and then which are received after?
New law. Purchase order has no relevance. And interestingly, this is one more dimension which will come out, and we talked about it to few of our clients in the past, that there will be a major realignment and vendor negotiations. And I give you a live example. Today you are buying a computer from some trader. He charges you, let's say, 1 lakh rupees plus VAT of 5%. Tomorrow GST rate becomes 20. Same person, same facts will come back to you and say that I charge you 1 lakh plus 20,000. Will you pass his bill? Yes or no? They say that VAT was 5, now it is 20. GST, so I am charging 20 instead of 5. That's going to be the vendor's version to you. And that is where realignment will come. You will have to tell him that, look, your 5 has become 20. But when it was 5, you are not eligible for excise credit embedded in the purchase. Moving forward, you are eligible for the excise credit which is now replaced by CGST. So that 1 lakh was not only your price, it also included something which had gone to the center, which you are going to get back. And therefore you can't take 1 lakh plus 20,000. You have to reduce your price from 1 lakh to maybe 90,000 or 85,000 to the extent of excise duty component embedded within that, and then charge me 20%. This aspect is known as realignment study, and especially if you have a long-term rate contract or you have some arrangements of those types, it will be very important to make sure that people do not make out money from you or you make out money from people. It's either way. So in the initial phase, everyone will just try to work on this ignorance or this confusion and try to, the entire realignment will happen. So who's going to take that profit? Especially even from a manufacturing sector, the product 29%, 28% becomes 20. So 8% is saved. Will that 8% saving come to you as a consumer? Each toothpaste will be cheaper by 8% ideally in terms of taxes. So do you expect the price of that product to fall by 8%? Perhaps not. Maybe it will not fall, and there is a supply chain. You have a manufacturer, you have a distributor, you have a dealer, then you have a retail chain. Their margins will get somewhere adjusted, and it depends on the equations of each of these persons and the business dynamics, which will settle on who makes profits out of GST and who makes losses out of GST. So that's an important business aspect to this entire process. So we go into the output taxes, and I think we've discussed this. We go to the credit aspect. Yes.
If the contract is based on the contracted basis, there is no invoice. It's a contract.
But some stage invoice will be raised. Most of the contracts has an invoicing mechanism.
Milestones are there.
Huh?
Milestones are there.
Yeah, so on milestone, you would expect the contractor to still raise an invoice. Payments generally in the contracting industry are based on invoice. It's not like renting where you just keep on paying irrespective of whether you receive an invoice. Yes, but invoice would still be coming, no? There would still be a flow of invoice. Even today the law requires you, the vendor, to raise an invoice, and most contractors do raise an invoice. It's not like landlords and things like that, commission agents who will just, depending on your turnover, you just give him 2% or 3%. It's not like that.
But then it should be the basis of the date of invoice means the date on which it's on month of September 2017, the date on which that rate is at GST.
That will apply.
With respect to the contract.
Yes. So let's go to credits, and I think lots of points there. Here.
So what will happen to the credits on the transactions which are not taxable earlier, but now it will become taxable?
Yeah, so we have a number of provisions in credits. We'll touch upon them one by one. Yeah.
Section 143, amount of CERMAT credit carried forward in a return. It will be allowed as input tax credit.
So it's a very simple type of a proposition they've said. They've said, look at your, let's assume first April 17 is the transition date. 31st March 2017, you have to file an ST3 return. There is a CERMAT account over there. There is a closing balance in that. Whatever is the closing balance in that will be carried forward in your CGST return as an opening balance. Make sure, and that's where again one important aspect which comes at all your payment teams, make sure whatever are pending invoices, all of them appear in ST3 for March 17. If they do not appear there is no other mechanism. After 5 months you realize कि नहीं मेरा March 16 का 17 का बिल रह गया है, उसका क्रेडिट नहीं मिला है. There is no mechanism to deal with that. So please make sure your March 17 half year return to be filed on 25th of April 17 is a perfect return, including all your invoices. There will be 2 or 3 aspects to this, but yes, this is one part of it which is important, which is in your control. Now, first concern will come here is, you are allowed to carry it forward in your CGST. Now, most of the SSs have centralized registration. And here there will not be a centralized CGST registration. So you have 5 branches, you have 5 returns and 5 CGST accounts. The first question which will come is, which return will have this as an opening balance? I hope you understand. They have not addressed that issue. Yeah, but I also is 30, na? So which state? The question is which state? So C can be adjusted against I can be adjusted against C. So that's not a problem. But which state? So let's say tomorrow you go into the GST. Today you have a segment register which is centralized. Tomorrow you have a branch in Maharashtra, you have a branch in Gujarat. So will you take it in the Gujarat return or in the Maharashtra return? They have not addressed this. Perhaps they might give you a choice. They might allow you to put it across returns so long as it is totally to the same amount. But this is something which we will have to wait, and this is a part of a representation which we will have to just think of how to go about it. So that is one aspect. Second aspect is, if today we have concept of 3-month payment. So if you pay the vendor within 3 months, your credit is fine. If you don't pay within 3 months, you have to reverse the credit. And once you have reversed the credit, it stays in your suspense account. It's not an expense. It stays in your suspense account, and you can reclaim the credit as and when you pay to the vendor. This is a service tax law. If as of 31st March you have such suspense account vendors, there is no transition for that. So if you have unpaid vendors more than 3 months and you have reversed the credit relating to it already, under the GST regime there is nothing which says that you can then, when you actually make the payment in the GST era, you will be able to reclaim the credit over there. So that is one more area which you should be careful about. Make sure you make the payments. I don't know where you arrange the cash from. That's another part. But as a consultant, my role is to say that you make the payment. Especially our payment should be. So that is the second concern. Capital goods they have addressed, so that is fine. Which is the next one, which I think Ritika can cover.
Section 144. Unavailed assignment credit on capital goods not carried forward in a return. It is to be allowed in certain situations.
So you understood this. So capital goods, when you purchase, you have 50-50 mechanism. 50% in the first year, 50% credit in the next year. So if your next year falls in the GST era, you will be allowed the credit subject to the goods being available as for use, and all those conditions are there. But they'll allow you the credit for that because that they have addressed. Next one.
Section 145. Credit of eligible duties and taxes in respect of inputs held in stock. Again, it is to be allowed in certain situations.
This is very important for traders, retailers, and everyone who today is not eligible for an excise credit. But moving forward, there will be a C component. So if you are not eligible for excise credit and you have some goods which are lying in your inputs as on 31st of March, if those inputs are against an excise paid invoice, you will be eligible to identify the excise component from them, make a stock statement saying that look, as on 31st March I have this stock and all this stock is excise paid. I was not eligible for credit under the old law because I was a trader, but I am going to sell these goods in a regime which is a GST regime, so please give me credit. That is this provision. So this is one important onus on traders, on retailers, and anybody else who is in that type of a sector who is currently not eligible for excise credits. And there is a transaction. Yes.
Even for works contractor?
Yes, to an extent a works contractor also, because they would have materials which would ultimately go in a full tax regime. So yes, very important point, even to an extent of a works contractor. Only thing is, for a works contractor, there can be some timing issues. So if you have stock as a works contractor, yes, you will be covered by this. But if you have already accreted those goods onto the client site, because works contract works on a concept of accretion. So long as it is in your warehouse or your site office, movable condition, it is stock, this transition provision will apply to you. But if accretion and transfer of property in goods has happened, but you have not raised an invoice, then there's a bit of a mess. So 31st March को जितना भी काम हो गया है, make sure you raise an invoice on 31st March. So it goes under the old law, you don't end up paying the double tax. And whatever is in stock, make a stock statement. Ensure that each of these against an excise get passed. That is very important. If you don't have a valid excise invoice for that period, you will not be eligible for the credit. Many of times, as traders and retailers, we don't get credit, so we don't care about an excise invoice and the documentation in that regard. So now, at least moving forward, we also should be more careful, knowing that yes, GST is likely to come. So maybe we should insist on our vendors to give us excise invoices wherever available.
Services?
सर्विसेज नहीं है, इनपुट्स के लिए. सर्विसेज के लिए ISP का क्लॉज है, बहुत ही स्पेसिफिक है, नीचे आएगा वो बात. Yeah.
General debit to profit and loss account, lying in stocks,
Which one?
and stationery. The VAT regime was not available.
No, that will not be allowed. So one of the conditions is that subject to the taxability, the credit should have been allowed under the old law and the new law. So for a trader, I can say that because I was a trader, I was not taxable. But the stationery items, things which were ineligible in the past period, otherwise than because of taxability, that credits will not get account.
For excise traders, that the certificate is automatically available or there is.
No, you will have a stock statement, you will have to do all those things.
We have to inform them or.
Yes. There will be detailed procedures and rules. What we have got is just the act. We still have to get rules, we have to get the rate schedule, we have to get notifications, all of that is still pending. So we have to wait, and yes, there will be a stock statement, there will be a certification of that stock statement, there will be a date for filing that stock statement. Without that, nothing is going to come. Yeah, that's the question.
How we can claim that excise duty credit on closing stock, because earlier we were not registered under excise.
Yeah, so that's exactly the reason why this transition provision is there. That's exactly the reason, because see what happens is, under the old regime you are not eligible for credit, but you are not paying any central tax. That was the reason you are not eligible for credit. Now, on the same very goods, I am going to pay a central tax. So then the center gets two taxes. One is excise duty fully available, received by it in the old period, and again they will take CGST. So it becomes double taxation. And that's why they have drafted this transition provision.
How in the goods where I have claimed the set off, for example, from VAT 5% prior to 31st March?
VAT में issue नहीं है because you claimed at the time of purchase.
नहीं, but वही goods में GST में 20% में बेचने वाला हूँ.
So that is a risk which you are taking. 5 का 10 हो गया, 20 नहीं. So that is a risk which you are carrying. There is no specific provision, and this is one important area which we are discussing, and most of the retail chains like you will face a problem, because what will happen is on 31st March you will have stock which will have an MRP. You naturally are unable to sell beyond that MRP. But 1st April when you sell, you will be required to pay 10 instead of 5. I am just taking the S component. And the extra 5 which you pay is not your margin. So there is going to be a dichotomy. Either the MRP will have to be increased, for which the goods will have to be sent back to the manufacturer, or there will have to be a special provision permitting for 1 month or 2 months alteration of MRP. Even if they permit alteration of MRP, I don't know how consumers will look at it. So if a housewife goes to a store and she sees a box which has 100 rupees as MRP, cut at 105, I don't know whether she's going to pay you 105. There will be lots of disputes at the cash counter, and that's going to be so that transition is going to be painful. For traders who are into B2B segment, we even say that you can reject the goods as of 31st March and have a fresh supply on 1st of April. For retailers, that's not possible. They can't have a zero stock. For every moment, the mall has to have goods. So saying I am rejecting the goods is not workable. So that's a challenge. We have to see how it gets addressed. Let's go to the next transition.
Section 146, credit of eligible duties and taxes on inputs held in stock to a taxable person switching over from composition scheme. It is to be allowed.
So this is specifically for restaurants and those types of cases which are currently into composition. Now moving forward, those composition will not apply because today restaurant composition is available even beyond 50 lakhs. Moving forward, that is no longer available. So they would have stock as on 31st of March on which they have not claimed the credit. There they are told that if you are moving from composition to the normal scheme, the VAT credit of the stocks lying with you will be available. You again will have to file a statement and you will have to prove all the tax invoices, and based on that the credits will be available if you are moving from a composition zone to a normal taxable zone.
The reverse case would be section 147 in which they'll have to pay the amount of credit
You
line.
end up in a situation like that you are moving from taxable to composition because composition there is no credit. So if you move into that zone, then stock के ऊपर जो आपने credit ले लिया है, please give it back. So exactly the reverse. Yeah.
Sir, this situation will not be applicable for the asset held as a stock or service?
No, this is for inputs.
Only.
So the classification of goods as inputs and capital goods continues. And to some extent it is useful because then we say that assets which are in the nature of capital goods, these restrictions will not apply. Yeah, let's move ahead.
Section 162, credit distribution of service tax by input service distributor. It is to be allowed under the new law even for old services.
Very important. Interestingly, they have given a provision for ISD. Wherein they have said that if you have an ISD registration and later on you receive an invoice of an old period, you can distribute that credit as CGST to the new units, to your distributing units. But such a provision without an ISD registration is not there. So that's a like enough. If you don't have an ISD registration, you are just having one single centralized registration. Post the transition, 31st March को जो आपका freeze हो गया वो हो गया, उसके बाद invoice आया, that will be a problem. But if you have an ISD, you still have a route, then you route it through ISD and then push the credits to the respective units. So that's again is a representation that similar to ISD, you should have a provision for delayed invoices in general cases. Next one.
Section 162A, tax paid on goods lying with agents. It is to be allowed as credit.
Which is fine, so because now you will be paying the taxes, so credits will be allowed on agency transactions under section 168 to A and B. I think we will go to the branch transfer, that's an interesting one.
162C, treatment of branch transfers. Retention is lost.
This was one question which was asked that if in moving forward there is no retention, just like there is no abatement, there is no retention. Today there is a retention on branch transfers, input tax credit is restricted. So people are asking that okay, if there is a branch transfer happened under the old period on which I have retained, but I am selling the goods in the new period, whether the retention which I have done, should I get it back? The answer is no. They say whatever has happened in the past, you have retained it and lost it, that's lost forever. Don't again come back and tell me that no, at the time of transfer, I had retained some money and I want it back. That is not going to happen. So I think that is fine. I don't think it's going to have a major impact in Canada. We go to the other obligations. This is as far as credits is concerned. Vishnu, your concern is sorted out in this, or there was something else you had asked from credit?
Yeah, I think
This one.
when you said that credits, which were earlier, say assuming for the previous law, the output side was not taxable.
Yeah.
But the credits pertaining to that input side will now be eligible in GST. That was not
Only for inputs,
only for the input.
not for input services or capital goods. Only inputs. So we go to other obligations, and here we have some specific provisions which they have drafted for job work and those types of cases. I think Ritika can quickly read that.
Section 150, inputs removed for job work and returned on or after the appointed day. There will be no impact if it is returned within 6 months. Section 151, semi-finished goods removed for job work and returned on or after the appointed day. Again, no impact if returned within 6 months. Section 152, finished goods removed for carrying out certain processes and returned on or after the appointed day. No impact if returned within 6 months. Section 162D, goods sent on approval basis, returned on or after the appointed day. No impact if returned within 6 months.
So all of these are consequential procedural provisions which they have tried to cover up a few situations here and there. Yeah. So what they are saying is if you send goods on approval basis and within 6 months you are returning it, then the return will not be treated as an independent supply. See, otherwise what happens is, as I was highlighting, I send you goods on approval and you return it within 6 months or whenever you return. That return is an independent supply. Rejections are independent supplies.
So whenever I'm sending it for approval, it is without any.
In the old law, moving forward it will be with a tax. Moving forward it will be with a tax. But this is a transition. All of these are transition provisions. One thing happening in the old law, another thing happening in the new law. So there are some aspects on what happens to pending litigation. In the everything today there are so many pending cases, refunds, and matters under the VAT and the service tax law. So how are they going to be dealt with? So we have a few sections on that. Ritika can just quickly take us through that.
Section 154. Pending refund claims are to be disposed of under the earlier law.
Very important. All your old refund claims will be adjudicated under the old law. They have said that if some amount is rejected, that rejected amount cannot be reclaimed in the current period. It will be lapsed or you will have to litigate under the old law. Yeah.
Section 155. Claim of CERMAT credit to be disposed of under the earlier law.
Same situation.
Section 156. Proceedings relating to output duty liability, again under the earlier law.
So if there is any show cause notice is pending or in future to come, all transactions up to March 17, show cause notices will be under the old law. We will have to fight it out under the old law, maybe 5 years, 10 years, and to that extent service tax law, VAT law would still be relevant and will keep on haunting us for the next few years. Next one.
Section 157. Treatment of the amount recovered or refunded in pursuance of assessment or adjudication proceedings, again under the earlier law.
So if in an appeal you win and you are expected to get a refund, that will be under the old law. Same way if there is a demand which is raised, interest penalty, all of that will be determined under the old law.
Section 158. Treatment of the amount recovered or refunded pursuant to revision of returns under the earlier law.
Right? So that again is under the old law. So these are the transition provisions which they have talked about. We have the sections, but I think we tried to cover it in the group. So we'll not again go into reading each of the sections. I think we just will be spending a lot of time in reading in the law, but it's there in a handout which has been given to you. All of this we tried to summarize in the tables earlier.